Now, today, Black communities in the United States, the Caribbean, and in Africa, they're in a position of choosing between what I referred to before as a choice between two cultures. This analysis is the best analysis you're going to get on the problem we're in and the way we get out of it. You hear me? Because it comes from God. I wish I was smart enough to have encompassed everything under a statement, a choice between two cultures. I've mentioned this before, but I'm putting a different emphasis on it today, but mainly so that we can use this to address how do we draw from our inner powers to produce systemic change in this country, starting with changing ourselves. When I asked that question of what had gone wrong in the Black community, God shared the light, which I always get without any words, telepathically. It said a choice between two cultures. God talks to you on your level and when you're ready and when you're humble. And I've been working on this for a long time. And I didn't have the answers because things were falling apart right before our eyes, and it was rapid and it was having effects that we hadn't really figured out. And so a young 18-year-old sister really opened my eyes by asking me a question I couldn't answer. That's part of how you learn. You know what I mean? It's an embarrassing way to learn, but hey, that's what we're here for, learning. So what does this mean? Since '68, powerful hostile forces have hit the Black community and subsequently the African world. And these forces have taken the form of deindustrialization, which I've covered before. I'm addressing this now because this is very important to look at the situation that we have to address now. And what's the effect of these forces on the life of Black people right now, brown people and other people as well, but especially Black people here and globally. So when deindustrialization occurs, jobs leave the Black community, go to the suburbs, but mainly to China and other countries, and good paying jobs leave the country. Person with a high school education or less doesn't have the means to support a family working at McDonald's. And so we see a collapse of Black families starting in '68, from 75% two-parent household to 29% now. Greater erosion between '68 and now than between 1619 and 1968. These forces did it. And I should point out, we're into conspiracy theories and a lot of them. This was not aimed at us. This was aimed at the bottom line for corporations. It had a bigger impact on us because of the nature of racism. And so it hit us harder. We see at the same time that this happens, neoliberalism has been adopted by Reagan. And so that means cutting back on social programs, ending them in many cases. And so now you don't have low-income housing being provided by the government. One of Biden's planks in his infrastructure plan that Blacks need to take advantage of is money for low and moderate income housing. It's not enough to produce all the housing we need, but it's a start. And as somebody that built housing in the '60s, low and moderate, still standing, I know the value of that. In Black communities, we need to be taking those efforts. Some Black churches do that on their own with government money, usually HUD. HUD is largely going out of this business now. But because of the pressure you put on Biden, forcing him to pick a vice president, forcing him to move to the left in ways he had never done before, you need to take advantage of these openings. But the key thing is, we see with neoliberalism, Friedman's program I've talked about before, trying to privatize everything that's provided by the government and basically put all the money in the pockets of very few people. We see that most of the social programs you had before are gone, including welfare done in by Bill Clinton following this same neoliberal agenda. We also see redevelopment hitting Black communities. We called it Negro removal in the '60s, where Black communities were torn down in part to stop Black resistance movements. And now we see it in gentrification, where A lot of whites are moving back into urban areas in which Blacks occupy. So these are all attacks on our people. And at the same time, as the jobs are gone, as communities are destroyed, not all of them, but too many, Black businesses are uprooted. And we've seen how 2008, we lost housing, which was a source of wealth. And now with COVID, 40% of Black businesses who couldn't get the financing that other businesses got from relief packages. So what we see then is in Black communities, life circumstances are reduced, and particularly for the poor, which is a large sector of our people. Many Blacks going to bed at night hungry. And fewer of them proportionally could get the relief on other levels that other groups could get, or were working in jobs where they were exposed, as Latinos have been, to the public and contracting higher rates of COVID and higher death rates built in to this systemic system of semi-colonial, racist, economic, capitalist oppression. By semi-colonial, I mean that the system that oppresses Black people, we used to define as a colonial system, meaning that an oppressor comes into a nation, takes it over, and runs it. That's colonialism, occupies it militarily and runs it politically, economically, and every other way it can. And certainly, this country is a successful domestic colony. That is, Europeans came from the outside, occupied it, exterminated 90% of the inhabitants, Native American people. And so from the Native American standpoint, this is a domestic colony. They are colonized. I call our situation semi-colonial because we have aspects of colonialism. But at the same, for example, the way the police occupy our communities, that's an aspect of colonialism. But the thing is, we don't have what's called continuous landmass, which means we're not concentrated in a specific area where we could come together at a certain point, if we had the power, strike for independence. It's semi-colonial. It's got elements of colonial, but it's not the same thing. And we need to be clear when we talk about what kind of system oppresses us. So the point is, these external forces have hit our communities, and this was not intended by our enemy. Do not give your enemy more credit than they deserve. They didn't think we had a culture, therefore they weren't out to create a choice between two cultures, except with drugs. Now with drugs, they knew they were putting in something that would do a death wish on the Black community by taking the youth out, a sector of youth who can't find work, and so their work becomes the underground economy. And that again then puts them in prison. And so this choice between two cultures is largely unintended consequence, and most of our people haven't figured it out. They figured the drug thing out. That is a mad culture, but they haven't figured out how the intrusion of the media into your home when families are weakened shifts values. I talked about this before. So this is the key point, that these external forces that have hit us have put us in a position where if we're going to get out of the situation we're in, then culture is going to be the key thing we have to draw from. And we're in a particularly weak position when we're divided over whether we have a culture, when we haven't evaluated the culture, and when we often don't appreciate the strengths that we have as a people. So these are things that we're going to have to address as a people.